my journey to the Yakutians, of course, was kind of crazy and tied into my other breeds. But I spent several years working at a service dog program, and working at that program, I learned, a whole lot. I was the kennel manager there. Um, Learned a lot about, care, maintenance, things like that. I really loved it. I also, although they are great dogs, I was a little burned out on labs and Goldens. By the time I left, I did learn I really did like the Goldens though. But, I really prefer personally the Spitz breeds. And, started, kind of slowly moving back more in that direction. My Siberian Husky program, that I currently have, I started in 2011, 2012, um, and it's started with you know kind of moderate quality, and kind of moved up from there. I through the Siberians and um, my involvement in ending up bringing some of my Siberians over, is how I ended up meeting my Russian friends that introduced me to the Yakutian Laika. And that's how the Yakutian Laikas, the majority of the gene pool actually ended up here in the US. My friend Katya had been telling me for quite a while you know, she'd be over here, we'd be showing the Siberians and my Lundahunts. Um, and she was always telling me that I should get Samoyeds. And they're not wonderful breed, but a little too much coat for me, and a lot of white. And so I was like, no, no, I like the Huskies, and here's my friend keeps telling me I should get Samoyeds because the Huskies and the Huskies are a little too crazy. And she's over here every time she would come, she'd have two or three, um, either like a couple of Malamutes or a Malamute and Akita. And I'm like, well, what I do know is I can't handle Malamutes or Akitas. So we would have a lot of fun, but I would definitely be tired by the end of the trip sometimes, with the traveling with the much larger dogs with us as well. And when I found the Yakutian Laika, I had seen some pictures. I actually had met one very briefly, when Katya brought over, one of my male Siberians, Bosco. I got to see really quickly a Yakutian that, she had imported for somebody else, when she came over, and we went to go to a dog show, an AKC show in, California. And so I saw the dog and I was like, oh, what is that? And at that time, they were not, in the stage they are now. It's a long stage, but they were not yet in the stage that they are in, FCI. And so they were, she was just like, basically, you can't show them. So, like, and she just said it was a Leica. And it was a cute black and white dog. Did, quick look. It did look kind of like a border collie. And I just didn't really think more of it. Um, and it turned out the owner of that dog is a lady named Lana that I would end up getting to know, pretty well later on. Um, so I didn't really think much more of it at that time. And then, um, over time, the process of a year or so, the breed was becoming, a part of SCI. Um, and again, forgetting I had already seen one real quick. So I didn't know it was including, like I just heard Leica, and had seen, some pictures of a dog named Serbit Ton Forest. And she's owned by Ton Forest Kennel, and you didn't know who the dog was or anything. But I'd seen the pictures of her, and I was like, I really like this dog. I was like, this dog is gorgeous. And so I started looking up the breed. And ironically, a friend of mine in Pennsylvania, at the same time, had like looked up the breed, and she didn't even know I was already talking to Katya. She had met Katya before as well, and she was like, "I want to get these," and I was like, "I'm not." Like Katya is already talking to me about them, and so she, imported some at the same time, um, and I showed Katya Surdik, and she was like, "Oh yes," she was like, she was like, "Oh, they're perfect for you." Because I asked her, I said, "Are they more common like a Samoyed, or are they, more energetic, more like a Siberian?" And of course, showline Siberians already don't fit a lot of the, um, stereotypical things that you hear about Huskies is just not so typical show lines anyway. But she was very excited. She was like, "Oh yes," she's like, "They're much more like a Samoyed." She's like, I'll pick the first, I'll pick dogs for you." She's like, "One of the best kennels is here in Novosibirsk," because she lived in Novosibirsk, just outside of Novosibirsk, Siberia, and that's where Elf Farm Kennel is. So it was really awesome because I had people that I knew and trusted to help me to find the dogs that would give me their honest opinions and stuff, that only looking out for me. They weren't trying to sell me dogs or anything like that. They were literally just trying to help us build the breed here with the best dogs that we could get. And quite a few of the dogs that I first brought over were ones that they went to the kennels and picked out themselves. They were able, because of their involvement, some of the dogs that I brought over were single who had been shown some as a puppy, but there actually wasn't, they weren't SCI yet, again, when he was a puppy. And then he was one of the two lead dogs on the Alpha sled team. He was replaced by his son when he came over here. We were able to get some very good quality dogs to get the bloodline started here. Unfortunately, those initial lines that I did bring over, because I brought them over to share. Obviously I have those lines in my kennels, but I imported quite a few dogs to try to have a very diverse gene pool. And so while I have, these other lines to breed them to, those initial lines, even with the best efforts to avoid popular size syndrome and things like that, other kennels they went to, are just continuing to be off that line, where they're not that they're, I mean, those lines are great. We need to continue to breed diversity in other lines so that not every dog in the breed is closely related to those first, 5 or 6 dogs that I brought over.
Let's talk about the history that you've come to know about the breed and why it's spoken to you.
Okay, so first I'll touch a bit on history. Again, this is kind of the saving of an ancient breed. There is, as there is many in many breeds, there's debates on if these dogs are from the ancient lines or these ones aren't, things like that. I'm very big on respect for breed clubs. We would not have. I enjoy this breed. They're a wonderful breed of dog. They make good companions. If they're well socialized, they can do just about anything. I like running with my animals as UTVs with the horses and carts, scooter, dryland, all of that. So they're just a overall dog for that. But I'm really big on the respect for the Russian Parent Club, is the parent club, and they selected the dogs that got to be registered. And those are the dogs that make the breed. Some people are like, well, they think this one was mixed with this or whatever. But, at the end of the day, our breed is what the Russian National Breed Club made the breed. And, that is the breed that I put myself in getting involved in. They are, derived from, the more ancient dogs of the region. Some debate whether everything is completely ancient blood. Tracy Smith went through the embark data on my dogs and several other breeders' dogs, which was actually quite a good diversity because it even has dogs that have retired and everything else. And to find out where they break away on the evolutionary tree, so to speak. And that's a link that I can send to you after if you remind me. But they break away, if I remember right, they break away right around where the Samoyeds do. And there's definitely, it does appear that there probably was, some admixed over time and things like that. Again, keep in mind, this breed was being used for, sledding work, for, actual sledding work, for, exploration, for tours, things like that. Very much, undoubtedly there probably was some admix, but whatever that was, would have likely happened quite a while ago. As happens with many breeds, I mean, you have to, if you're starting to register dogs, you have to start somewhere. When I started looking at the breed here, now of course you have, in the 90s was when, they started like putting together a breed club and stuff in Russia. keeping the pedigrees, finally, getting acceptance with RKF and then getting acceptance with FCI. But when I started looking at the breed, there was only a few here that we know of in North America. There was somebody that had imported a couple of them in California. She had about the same time that happened. She had actually an unplanned litter from the imports that she bred. One thing I will say that I can join her in saying that from my experience, that I did have Carolina dogs, Yakutians can be very similar to where their heat cycles are pretty much when they want their heat cycles to be. They can be in heat one time and then they can be in heat again 2 months later. Or some of them will go 8 or 10 months in between. And they're really good at very, very, very silent heats. And we learned that very, very quickly. There was another lady named Kathy that had initially gotten the dog. She had imported, I think, only 2 or 3 Yakutians. And sorry, we have a chocolate lab that's very excited over here. She had imported, I think, 2 or 3 of them. I think she only had 1 or 2 litters from them. But she's one that actually applied and put them in AKCFSS. Actually had a very hard time finding her, reaching her, to be like, oh hey, we have this going on with the breed. Do you want to be a part of it? And I think she just has a lot going on, so she hasn't really stayed that involved. But when Katya and I were looking at the breed, they started helping me to find dogs that were going to bring us, those dogs that were doing really well in the show ring, not just against in the breed, because of course, although they're a breed, the numbers go up quickly as far as entries and stuff, but that were doing well in groups and things like that. But that were also sledding dogs. The people that started out helping me in the Novosibirsk region, very much are, working, showing sled dog people. So I'm really glad that I had their help and their influence. There was, I think, 2 or 3 trips that Katja and Oksana, went to Alpha on Kennel, looking at dogs, meeting the dogs. Some of the initial dogs that I had purchased, they kept and showed over there for a while. My friend Oksana is amazing at teaching off-lead reliability. So while mine in general are, especially the ones that she raised, I mean, you could have them anywhere out in the middle of the city off lead. They're just amazing dogs. But we imported the breed with the idea to work towards AKC registration. One of my big things is, as we all know, happens very often in rare breeds. And again, I have succeeded and failed in that in some aspects because, again, my early lines that did go to other breeders, just continue to perpetuate, and they're great lines. But I really wanted to avoid popular sire syndrome as much as possible. I wanted diversity. And when you're looking at a breed, I think when they initially, did the initial records, it was only like 12 initial dogs that were registered. So you don't have a huge gene pool to begin with. So we tried to get as much diversity as we could. And we also, as we were bringing the dogs over, I think that it was through 2019 that we started bringing them over. As we were bringing them over, it started getting harder and harder, as in the regulations were tightening up. This was during the time when there was a lot of things going on with the rescue dogs. People were bringing in rescue dogs that had, you know, um, fake rabies stuff, things like that. And so what we ended up with, people getting bitten by rescue dogs they transported and things like that. And it pretty much every time we brought dogs over, or even if they came over just because they would come over and we would show together, it was getting harder and harder to enter, even with their dogs that were going to return. And so we saw that coming. What we didn't see coming was in 21, so we've gone through COVID and everything, and I had dogs that, I had in Russia that were boarded. The shows kind of started up bigger and heavier, there in 20, than they did for us over here. And plus, I was in the middle of moving and everything, so I had a lot of my dogs being shown over there. Like I had Misha, I purchased Misha as an adult. he stayed with Venislava from Run Dogs, who, both shows and does sledding with her dogs. His initial owner had not done sledding with him, so he stayed there to get his Russian championship and to do sledding, and most of all, also to leave some progeny in Russia. The depth of quality that we've tried to get, for example, one of those litters from that litter from Misha, those litters from Misha in that time that I left him there, I think it was 23, was the number one dog in Russia. I actually already owned his sire at the time. We were just, hadn't brought him over here yet. Urena and Yolka, who are two of our foundation dogs, their sister Yuta, they started doing a top 20 top 10 or top 20 competition. She won that, for in Russia. She was 7 at the time, so 7-year old breed female sledding dog, won, that big competition for the year for the breed. So we really tried to bring in both quality and diversity, and I'm very thankful that we did, because we soon after that led up to, again, coming from 2020 into 21. I had Misha over there. I had purchased Rio. He was in Call Aqua Marine. He was living with Oksana at the time, being trained and being shown and stuff. He was really, really doing well, showing as a puppy. And I had Citrus on my chocolate male, from Irina Romanova. And she was showing him. And we had a couple others that were supposed to come over. I had Yolka, had not come over yet. She couldn't come until spring because she was on the actual L1 racing team, and she was already a Russian champion. What we didn't expect, we already had, we're importing the dogs. So it's getting harder. It's getting harder to bring them over. If COVID comes, we can't bring them for a while at all. We literally can't bring them. I've had, Yolka coming over soon. My friend Marina that lives here in Texas, that's a dual citizen. She was gonna plan what she was gonna bring her over. Um, we've got, kind of these long-term plans, and suddenly we find out that the CDC is banning dogs from Russia and I think it was 60 other countries. Basically, any country that wasn't rabies free after, I think it was July 21st, something like that, was being banned. Um, so that kind of put us in a really crazy position. So I had dogs in, multiple places in Russia, with actual friends, with their breeders and things. And I had actually planned, some of them were going to come soon. The others weren't really planned to come until fall. And then we found out in June that we basically had 1 month to get every dog out of Russia, or we weren't going to be able to bring them here. They were literally banned by the CDC. And so Gulnara, and I am going to chop up some names here, so I apologize to any friends now that I chop up their names because I'm used to talking to them online. Except for, my friends who are actually coming back and forth. Gulnara from Spanaya Staya Kennel, which is a free flock kennel in Russia. She and my friend Marina here, and Rebecca Burnett, who is Hickory Meadows Kennel. She was kind of newer. She had a few dogs from me. She had, at that point, imported, I think, 2 dogs. We got together, and Gulnara helped us to figure out how to make sure we had most of the gene pool, and helped us to, we got some of the dogs from her. We got dogs from other kennels. She saw something, she was like, we need to not miss out on this. Then Rebecca bought several dogs she had not initially intended to purchase, to just to help make sure that we had an adequate gene pool here, because we didn't know if we were ever going to be able to import again. And now we can. We can import from a lot of the countries. There's a lot stricter regulations. It would be a lot harder. I'm not rich by any means, but I used to sell supplies and stuff at the shows, and the job that I had at the time, an extra business income that I had is, where I worked really hard to get the money to get these dogs here. But it was expensive then, but what it would cost now is just insane. There just would be no way. And on top of it, we had the AKC ban come in place. First, we deal with the 2021 ban. We finally get all the dogs here. That's what some of the pictures I sent you are all those crates and bringing in the bunches of dogs all at once. We helped. I think her name was Anna. She was in Pennsylvania, and she also is a dual citizen, or Russian American, and she helped us to get set up to get these dogs here. And she was helping so many people to bring dogs over before that ban was going to take place in July of 21. So we got the dogs here. Um, Thankfully, at the time, because of moving, I quickly had to come up with a very large amount of money just for that shipping bill. Thankfully, I did have a other house to sell, so I took a huge loss in equity in that house, and sold it off quickly to a dealer, to a broker, to really quickly you know get the majority of the transport money to get that group of dogs here, because it was very much an hour never, now or never kind of thing. Um, Eventually, CDC did some changes, things like that. Now it is possible to import. There's a lot more restrictions. It's a lot more time consuming. They have to have titer tests and all that. But now AKC has a ban on registering Russian dogs. So now also, even if you do import new dogs from Russia, you can't get them registered. It's really a good thing for the gene pool that we brought these dogs here when we did,
Can I
because
ask
we
a
wouldn't be able to repeat it. Uh-huh.
quick question just to
All
clarify?
questions, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad the stream of conscious. That's I prefer that. But the quick question is what is the reasoning behind the ban with the AKC? Is this
Um,
politically motivated, or is this
it was
motivated by yeah?
it's completely politically motivated. Um, I will stay out of my opinion on the ban. It hurt us badly, because even when they did start to again take the dogs that were already here, the the requirements that they wanted for it, because people were cheating. People were newly purchasing adults, and then, it's like, oh, the dog was born before then, so at first, like, AKC would just assume the dog was already here. And in many cases, that just wasn't the case. The dog was not just already here. Um, not necessarily in our breed, but just across the board. Um, and so it kept getting harder and harder. The first few dogs, once they started to accept our paperwork again, wasn't a big deal. But then it was like, sometimes, I mean, I'd send a dog in and not hear back, or I'd send a bunch of packets in, and I get back like half the registrations. And at the same time, our post office was not doing a very good job. And so I had a very hard time figuring out what was processed, what wasn't, and everything else. One dog, for example, Citrus, I sent him in so many times, over and over and over again. I sent him in, and like sometimes I'd get a reply back and that they needed the original copy, not the PDF, and blah blah blah. And I'd write back and I'd be like, "This is what I have. Like this is the original." You know what I mean? Like I can't. This is what it is. And it took me a very long time to get some of these dogs registered. One of them, um, one dog had accidentally got double registered, and when that went to get fixed, somebody higher up turned around and unregistered another dog that was on the same transaction. That what we had, for proving the dog was here before the ban wasn't good enough. Um, Thankfully, that dog had been OFA'd already, so that helped. There's, I think, 4 or 5 dogs that I imported that we didn't end up including in the gene pool, and ultimately rehomed because of AKC paperwork. One thing I will say, that our little breed club, did get involved. We did not get involved in the politics at all. It's just not our place to get involved in the politics of other countries. It's not something our breed club did. But we did. There were breeders that we knew, that were in Ukraine, that felt unsafe, and felt that they needed to leave. The effort started in the middle of the night, with one family that had a dog, which who I actually happen to have now, named Flash. They were really close to the bombing, very early bombing, and we could see videos of their dogs. So a friend in Germany, Sabine, she and I ended up literally up all night, sending money to them and getting help on PayPal from people to send money to help them to leave. It ended up by morning, it was like a whole club effort. It wasn't huge amounts, but if you feel like you need to leave because you're not safe, the gas to get to leave is huge. And I think we raised and gave out about $3,000. It might have even been a little more. And it was literally just us, getting connected with these breeders that we knew who they were already and helping them to leave. The ban itself that came in right around, I think it was in March that they put the ban in. I didn't expect it, to be honest. I did not expect it at all. I actually had just gone through a divorce. I just finished moving. The financial thing of bringing all the dogs here faster than expected, everything else. The last thing I expected was AKC to turn around and ban Russian dogs. We suddenly instantly could not register these dogs, even though they were already here. We couldn't register them. And you can imagine that was upsetting, depressing. It made the whole thing a very, very, very long process. Um, in fact, it was just, I think, 2.5 months ago now, that I finally was able to get the last two done. And one of them was the one that I mentioned earlier that that the person had unregistered, and it kept being, you need this, you need this, you need this. Um, and our breed club got the American Stock Dog Registry. Those papers, from our understanding, would be accepted. We went through the process of putting the dog in there as well. Then I got the message back again that wasn't accepted. And when I got that message, I was like, since most else had been done, it's just kind of like those two last ones that I was having to really push for. I was like, not in a rude way, but this is just not right, and I'm going to reach who I need to reach nicely, to get something done about this. And I sat down and I wrote a letter to registration saying, explaining things like, like one thing that a lot of them they were wanting was the vet paperwork, from bringing over the dogs. Well, I can tell you that insane rush of dogs that were brought over, not just ours, but of everybody else's in so many breeds in July of 2021, we didn't get past half of that paperwork or more because there was so much for her to do. I mean, it was insane. Um, I mean, I've seen pictures of the crates that people didn't take, the wooden crates that people didn't take. I mean, they were stacked up like a house. There was so much. We didn't have access to that because we'd never had a reason to need it. Once we brought the dogs here, we always went and got their, shots boosted again and things like that in case the strain they, were vaccinated with over there wasn't the best for here, things like that. So we weren't really worried about that. So yeah, the ban caused a lot of problems and a lot of delays, and it is still in place. They have made a few changes, which are in the AKC board minutes. So some certain dogs that have been registered in other countries in between, things like that. Like for example, my dog Flash, he was initially born in Russia, but he's lived in Ukraine like his entire life. And so rather than needing some of what we initially needed before, what they most of all needed was proof that, yes, this dog was also registered, in Ukraine, and they accepted his Ukraine paperwork instead. And I don't know if that was that was in his case, we were able to prove that was well, that happened well before the ban. I don't know for sure how that works now, dogs that are brought over now. Like I said, he was already out of Russia as a puppy. But now it's, you could still import. Again, now it's harder, but you can't register those dogs with AKC. So it's very difficult to bring over anything from Russia now.
Does Russia have a ban on American dogs?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so Russia doesn't have the same sort of ban as the Americans do with their dogs, or they
Um,
do with ours.
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. I have definitely spoken with a couple of the Russian breeders that I have dogs from about we may potentially be sending a dog or two back from certain bloodlines. As far as I know, there is no ban in that direction. Um, and I won't be importing probably, maybe even ever again. There may be at some point, a certain dog that we want to add to the gene pool or something. I imported enough bloodlines that, I don't intend to go that route. Um, I have quite a few older dogs right now, and although, as they're aging, that will be difficult, but also my kennel will decrease by those numbers. I intend to, have the number in my kennel go down slowly with that band. So I'm sorry, with their passing. Rebecca Burnett at Hickory Meadows, she imported, you know, not the number that I did. I think she imported 13. I could be wrong. But she imported a good amount of dogs. And what she imported, there was a couple that were like, oh, she likes that dog. But most of what she imported was, to very specifically to add to the gene pool here on things that couldn't come from what I had or what she knew I had coming. And that's one thing that's kind of crazy is, people will look at like, because we did do this major import project. And what it reminds me of, when I was a kid, again, we didn't have the internet. And I will never forget watching the episode of Read All About It, about the guys going to Africa and bringing back the Basenjis. Um, and how that's how they got the brindle, into the breed over here and things like that. And I just thought it was like the coolest thing. I just thought it was so neat. So it has been fun to be a part of something that is going to add to a breed long, long, long after I'm gone. It's just really cool. The Yakutian Laikas Club of America did a supported entry for the show. That had been planned in the works for a very, very, very long time. We wanted to do a specialty, but we could not do a miscellaneous breed specialty. But they did allow us to do the supported entries. Um, and we had, really amazing awards. And we had some entries from a couple of mine I didn't bring due to timing and everything and space in the vehicle. So a few others that entered didn't come as well. But we had 23 Yakutian Lycos show. So we still had a very large breed entry. Um, and of those 23, I think I figured it out that 21 of the 23, there were like two other imports. But everybody else that was there that was not imported has either a dog that I imported or a dog that I bred in their pedigree. Um, so, we've definitely made a big mark on the breed, being able to exist and go forward here. We had to have 150, to move to FSS. They are a breed that has usually pretty large litters. So with that, I will say, I would love to mention that, if you are a pet person and you are interested in this breed, don't think that because you're only going to have a pet and you're not going to breed that, that those people aren't important. Because, sometimes we get litters of 3 or 4, sometimes we get 13. And obviously, 13 puppies aren't all going to go in the hands of other breeders and people they're showing and stuff. And the pet homes tend to really get the word out about the breed. Um, there is a lot of people, which understandably, on quick glance, they will see them and they think either border collie or they think woolly husky because you do have a lot of, quite frankly, lesser quality, I would say non-breed standard type Siberians that look kind of similar to a Yaku. breeders that are breeding to the standard, don't breed intentionally woolly haired huskies, and markings are irrelevant. But we're not breeding for woolly coats. We're not breeding for curly tails because that's not correct on a Siberian husky. And some of those features that people think belong on a husky that don't, actually are found in the Yakutian Laika. And in a dog that overall, there's a lot of similarities, but the Yakutian Laika overall, even compared to showline Siberians, does have more of an off switch. They are very much a, oh, we're running, every day we're running, and then like it's raining, and then it's like, oh, so today we're gonna hang out on the couch, and they're like, yay, couch day. Where my Siberians would be more like, wait, we're running, you know what I mean, and take a while to decide that, oh, okay, I guess this is what we're doing today. Our dogs, almost all of my dogs, not all of them. Our property we're actually getting a better fence soon, but the majority of our property is fenced with, what was already there, to keep in livestock. Um, and definitely not made for, fencing in, sled dogs, especially Siberians. But most of our dogs, have a temperament that they can be off lead, out there with us, whether it's one or two at a time, or sometimes seven or eight or more at a time. They tend to do very well, as a pack, which I thoroughly enjoy. One of my actual favorite things at the service dog program that I worked at, and the thing that they would say was probably one of my best qualities, was, other than anything animal related, just getting people to show up and do their work and do it on time is a chore. But I really enjoyed working with whatever dogs were there, as a pack. Getting out. We usually had maybe 10 to 20 at the program. Um, Sometimes only about eight. It would depend whether if it was time for team training, then all the dogs would come to the facility, so that they could get ready to get placed with their people. But I loved working with the dogs in groups. And they always said that I was like the best at mixing the dogs and getting them to get along and figuring out who got along, and who I couldn't do that with, because even with well trained service dogs, you're still dealing with dogs, um, and that's truly one of my favorite things. And one thing that I absolutely love about the Yakutians is, I can sit there and I can bring out bunches of them and all at once, and they just run around together. And this includes dogs that I bought as adults. Like Flash. He was raised in Ukraine. Um, he ultimately came to us, because his family, who loved him very dearly, um, ended up resettling in Germany. And where they resettled, they could not find the housing that they needed, with having large dogs. So they unfortunately had to make that choice. And he went to, my friend I mentioned in Germany that helped with the fundraising. He went to her, um, and then it was decided that he was going to come to me. Um, and it was kind of funny because she mentioned, she's like, I have this mail from Russia that she's like, I'm thinking maybe he should come to you. And I was like, no, I'm not importing anybody. I'm good. I don't need any other bloodlines or anything. And I was like, but send me the info. I might know somebody. And when I saw it was him, and Flash is you'll see on his pictures, he's the one that has kind of like the markings like this on his face. He's just a very, very unique dog. And it was like when I saw it was him, and knowing that, we had helped, literally get his family and seen their journey, coming out of the war zone. I was like, yeah, I was like, I'll figure it out, bring him here. I was like, he needs to be far away from all of that. And so that was how we ended up with Flash. I didn't even know, because he was older, I didn't know if we'd ever even get any puppies from him, but it wasn't really about that. It was about bringing this, very special dog, bringing him to our home. Um, we did get puppies from him. He actually became very proficient at breeding still, including a couple of litters where he broke himself and the females out of crates, and was in charge of that. One thing that is so important for people to remember, while they are a versatile breed, and people are like, they're sledding, they're hunting, they're herding, they're blah, all of this. Um, but they are primarily a sled dog. These are a sledding dog that was used for other purposes. That they are not a equal sled dog, equal herding dog, equal this. They are a sled dog first and foremost. That is on the, I would say, easier trainability spectrum, not necessarily higher, because to be honest, people can train Siberian Huskies to do anything as well. Um, you know, we have them doing everything. There's even, I mean, there's a Siberian Husky Keisha mix that's doing bite sports. You know, again, it's a mix. But you know, anybody can train a Siberian to do whatever. There's also a Siberian that had passed away that had like 100 titles. Many of them, some of them were in some of the minor protection sports. I don't know about. I don't know hardly anything about protection sports. But the Yakutian Laika, which we prefer that they do not do fight sports, they're still a primitive breed, but in some ways they train a little bit more like your other typical breeds. For their handlers, quite a few of them are, a little more treat motivated, things like that. But they are first and foremost a sled dog. They were also used, a little bit of herding. A good example, and they have smart instincts. Some people are training them, doing herding competitions, things like that. Lana, I'm in Colorado. She's the one that had that original dog that I mentioned meeting. She did the first herding instinct title in the U.S., the first herding instinct trial in the U.S. Unfortunately, at the time, they wouldn't even award them for the breed yet. But she did actually complete the first one. Um, I use them to put our livestock away. I know nothing about herding. Literally, I know nothing about herding. And they're so easy to train for that. Like Cha Cha, I can just let her loose, and she will just kind of go around. We did have goats and sheep. We just have miniature horses now, and she will go around them, and she will just kind of move in until they go in their pen, and then she's like, okay, well, that was it. And it's literally just a natural instinct for her. Um, and then they were used some for hunting. I do have an owner who does small game hunting and retrieving, who has a puppy that's about 7 months old, that she's training for that. She does like squirrel hunting and things like that. The degree of her plans of use for the dog is something I probably would have to get more, information from her. But they are truly a very versatile breed. The other thing to remember is not that some were not kept outside, but for the most part, I mean, it's insanely cold there. Um, and part of that, a lot of that actually has to do with the position with the mountains, specifically, rather than how far north they are. The chair of our judges education committee went like looking into that. She's very big on trying to find out the whys. A lot of people are more into the whys. I'm kind of more into it. Yes, I like this breed. I appreciate the breed club. I like what the breed is, based on what they say the breed is. Um, but she researched, why it's so cold there, when it's actually not even in the Arctic Circle. But it has a lot to do with the positioning in the mountains, and things like that. And that's one thing that people don't understand is even though it's so cold there, it's actually not, the city of Yakutia is not actually in the Arctic Circle. But these dogs, just because they lived where it's super cold, doesn't necessarily mean these dogs were always outside dogs. They were given proper housing. They're not just left out there to fend for themselves. One of the breeders, Vladimir, he bred my dog Ihala, Arkansas kennel. Ihala was initially purchased by my Russian friend Katya, and she came over. She was supposed to only come for a couple of years, and then the world kind of got crazy, and so she's definitely staying here now. Um, but like he said, when it's that cold out, yes, they go out. He's like, but they're also pretty excited to come back in, and the breed likes to be with their people. They're very much that way. Um, but they really, again, my big concern is people getting away from remembering that this is a moderate load, long distance sled dog. This is, we can do weight pull with them. We can do fast cat with them. We can do all of these things with them. But at the end of the day, what this breed is intended primarily to do is to go a lot of miles at a moderate pace with a moderate load, usually in a team. And I that's my only concern, my probably my biggest concern about it's great we're doing the sports. I mean, I bred the female that's, the number one um, lifetime for Fast Cat. Great dog. She's a smaller female. She would be good on a sled team. She's not going to be the greatest sled dog. But she's a super great, short distance sprinting dog. So what I do worry that in the future we're going to have people breeding, you know, for this sport or this sport versus overall what the breed is supposed to be. We do a lot of I love speed. I also have some balance issues, so I have to take my speed carefully. I now have miniature horses and ponies, and I'm driving horses again rather than riding them. So anything that I run the dogs with, pretty much has to have more stability than I do. So we have a mini Jeep that we run them with, different things like that. Well, I actually don't have the mini Jeep now, but we run them a lot with the UTVs. Now I'm moving over, kind of running the horses and the dogs together, which has been fun and a goal. One of the reasons that was one of my goals is a lot of the places that I want to go run the dogs don't allow anything that is mechanized. They'll allow horses, so I can, go drive one of the horses and take one or two of the dogs. So um, they love the distance. They love it. But I hope that we will get a lot of people that want to participate in those type of activities as well. Not just, what gets, Fast Cat is great. It's great people are getting out with their dogs. It's for some reason now where people get the biggest ribbons. But again, at the same time, this is not a sight hound. This is a long distance sledding dog. And I just hope that we don't get too far, from that. I very much made sure we brought over dogs that fit that. Yulka again, like she had to, you know, finish the sledding year. She was on a very competitive, very long distance team, and she had to finish the sledding year before she, came over. We did have fun the year before last. We did get snow for a few days, and thankfully they were very easy on me because I took Single and Yulka, who, again, they're both straight off of the Elflon team, and the Elflon team is not slow. And I, finally got to, get them out on the sled. We didn't go fast or too far, but it was fun. And in a little town in East Texas, we actually headed into town, went to the park. Everybody's in there, with the side by sides. Anybody that had cars was sliding everywhere, and so everybody that's anywhere is in side by sides and stuff like that, unless they had 4-wheel drive. And we're literally at the park giving the kids, sled rides, in Texas, which was so cool. So we've had a lot of fun with the breed. Will mention we're actively looking for people that this breed will fit, that we can make sure that we leave this gene pool here, that we work so hard to bring. Um, Very often people will think, oh, well, we can import this dog from Europe and bring in some new blood. Somebody that has, and in fact, he's in some of the pictures I sent you, that has the son of my dog, Misha. She didn't check the pedigree, and she was like looking at this litter in other countries. Wonderful litter. I looked at it and I was like, you do realize that those puppies, that the father of those puppies is a half brother to your dog, correct? And she was like, no, I didn't even think of that. So we do have a good, strong, diverse gene pool here. Right now, my primary focus is making sure we don't lose that and working hard with these puppies. There has been a lot of dogs, and even trying to start them well, even before I started doing the puppy yoga and literally traveling with the puppies. I have a puppy patio with sensory stuff, different things for different to get them, to feel the difference in balance and things like that. And them going from that to a conformation ring is very different because this is not a breed that there are some lines specifically that just love everybody no matter what, almost like a Siberian, like most Siberians do. But some of them, if they're not really well socialized as puppies, they're not going to like strangers. Being so involved in the breed, every time they're showing somewhere, somebody sending me videos. And there was judges are having a hard time getting their hands on these dogs.